Was Sméagol always a villain? Was he a cold-blooded murderer before he even touched the One Ring? And was he truly a servant to the spider Shelob, or something far more sinister? Stick around until the end to uncover the true horror of who Sméagol really was. Gollum is easily the most misunderstood character in Tolkien's universe, and while the movies give us a legendary performance, they miss the dark, specific details that make his story a true tragedy.
Precious.
To understand why Frodo and even Gandalf pity him, we have to look at the book versus movie differences that changed everything. In the films, Smeagol looks like a generic primitive hobbit, but Tolkien is much more specific. Smeagol was a Stoor. Stoors were the water dwellers of the Hobbit ancestors. They were broader, heavier, and unlike the hobbits we know in the Shire, Stoors could actually grow beards. But it wasn't just physical. While the movie shows him as a victim of a magical trance the moment the ring appears, the book describes Smeagol as a prying and nosy character, long before he saw the gold. He loved roots and beginnings and burrowing into secrets. The ring didn't create his malice, it magnified a darkness that was already there.
The Stoors were broader, heavier in build. Their feet and hands were larger. They were well known to be Stoors, as indeed was shown by the down that many grew on their chins.
The movie portrays the struggle for the ring as a sudden, chaotic fight. But did you know Smeagol committed murder before the ring ever claimed him? In the book, he demands the ring from Déagol because of a birthday custom. When Déagol refuses, Smeagol strangles him. Tolkien is clear. The ring hadn't even touched Smeagol's finger yet. The willingness to kill for a precious was a part of his own fractured soul, not just Sauron's magic.
The murder of Déagol haunted Gollum, and he had made up a defense. It was his birthday. Déagol ought to have given the ring to him.
The relationship between Gollum and the great spider, Shelob, is one of the biggest book versus movie shifts. In the film, Gollum leads the hobbits into the tunnel and simply hides while Shelob hunts them. He seems like a terrified guide, but in the text, Gollum is almost a priest to Shelob. He had encountered her years earlier and survived by worshipping her. He brought her meats, orcs, and other creatures to stay in her favor. Was he her slave? Not exactly. Tolkien describes him as an obsequious servant who promised to bring her sweeter meat, referring to the hobbits. In the book, Gollum actually bows to her and communicates with her in a way the movies leave out. He wasn't just a guide, he was a traitor offering a sacrifice to an ancient demon.
Not this time.
Why does Gollum look like an orc while Bilbo stayed young? In the movies, it's often attributed to the length of time, but in the books, it's about spiritual fading. Tolkien explains that a ring bearer doesn't gain more life. They just stretch until every minute is a weariness.
He was interested in roots and beginnings. He dived into deep pools. He burrowed under trees. His head and his eyes were downward.
Because Smeagol used the ring for malicious and crooked purposes, spying on his grandmother and stealing from his family, his body reflected his inner decay. He was cast out by his family matriarch, not just for being weird, but for being a criminal.
He used the ring to find secrets, and he put his knowledge to crooked and malicious uses. His grandmother, desiring peace, expelled him from the family.
But perhaps the most tragic difference of all happens on the stairs of Cirith Ungol. In the movie, we see a calculated, villainous plot. Gollum frames Sam by sprinkling Lember's breadcrumbs on his cloak while he sleeps, leading to Frodo sending Sam away in anger. But in the book, this never happens. Instead, there is a silent, haunting moment of peace. While the hobbits are asleep, Gollum looks at them, and for a split second, the Gollum persona fades away. Tolkien describes him looking like an old, weary hobbit, shrunken by the years, reaching out a trembling hand to touch Frodo's knee in a gesture of genuine love. In that one moment, he was Smeagol again. He was human. But then, Sam wakes up. Seeing the creature reaching for his master, Sam snaps at him, calling him a pawing sneak. That harsh word, that lack of trust, is what finally snaps the last thread of Smeagol's soul. The old hobbit disappears, and the Gollum monster returns for good. Sam didn't mean to, but by failing to see the change in Sméagol, he accidentally slammed the door on the only chance the world had at saving him. The climax at Mount Doom is where the movies take the biggest liberty. The film shows Frodo tackling Gollum, and they both fall. It looks like a heroic struggle to finish the job. But in the book, no one could willingly throw the ring into the fire. Not Frodo, not even a hero. The ring is destroyed because of pity. Because Bilbo and Frodo spared Gollum's life earlier, he was there to bite the finger off, and in a blind, ecstatic dance of triumph, he stepped too far and slipped. It was an accident of greed that saved Middle-earth, fulfilling Gandalf's prophecy that even the miserable Gollum had a part to play. Gollum didn't just lose his mind, he lost his heritage as a Stoor, his place in a family, and ultimately his chance at redemption because he chose the precious over his own soul.
"Precious, precious, precious," Gollum cried. "My precious, oh my precious." And with that, even as his eyes were lifted up to gloat on his prize, he stepped too far, wavered, with a last wild cry fell in.
In the end, we're left with the most painful question of all. Was Sméagol truly a villain, or was he just a soul that stayed in the dark for too long? The tragedy of Sméagol isn't just that he was a murderer or that he lived for 5 centuries as a monster. The real tragedy is that for a few flickering moments on the road to Mordor, he almost came back. When Frodo called him by his old name, when he looked at him not as a creature, but as a person, something in Sméagol woke up. For the first time in 500 years, he felt the warmth of a hand that didn't want to hurt him. He felt the weight of pity. In those glimpses, we don't see a villain. We see a broken, lonely hobbit who was desperately trying to remember what it felt like to be loved. But the shadow of the ring was too heavy, and the scars of his past were too deep. Sméagol's life is a reminder of the most terrifying truth in Middle-earth, that evil doesn't always start with a dark lord on a throne. Sometimes it starts with a single selfish choice on a riverbank. He spent his final breath clutching the very thing that had eaten his soul, finally finding peace in the fires of the mountain, not as a hero, but as a victim of his own obsession. He was a creature of the shadows who died for a light he could no longer see, and perhaps that is the saddest part of his story. He wasn't just a monster to be feared, he was a hobbit who was lost, found, and then lost all over again. Do you think if Sam had been as kind to him as Frodo, Sméagol could have been saved? Or was his fate sealed the moment he laid hands on Déagol? Was he a monster born or a hobbit broken? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you found this dive into Sméagol's tragedy meaningful, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. We'll see you in the next one.